plaintiff Janel Grant, an ex-employee of WWE, has brought forth a lawsuit against the organization, alleging she endured physical and emotional abuse, sexual assault, and trafficking during her tenure there. Grant's legal action serves not only to seek justice for her own experiences but also to represent those too fearful to come forward. The lawsuit implicates WWE's billionaire founder and executive chairman, Vincent K. McMahon, too. Their paths crossed in March 2019, a period when Grant was facing significant personal challenges, including the grief of losing her parents after years of caregiving, unemployment, and the loss of her family home due to bankruptcy. In the wake of her family's passing, Grant focused on securing employment, often taking unpaid roles and volunteering in community projects. Her efforts caught the attention of the building's resident manager, who reached out to Vince, proposing a meeting with Grant and highlighting her potential and recent hardships. Vince agreed with enthusiasm. Vince's subsequent friendship with Grant initially appeared promising, as he offered her an undefined role at WWE, alongside attention, assurances, and gifts, such as a VIP experience at WrestleMania. However, this seemingly opportune beginning soon deteriorated into a distressing ordeal. Vince's behavior increasingly overstepped boundaries, particularly during meetings regarding Grant's potential employment at WWE. He exhibited inappropriate conduct, including greeting her in his underwear, touching her, requesting hugs, and divulging personal details. He also insisted that their closeness remain a secret, threatening legal action against those he perceived as problematic while vowing to protect loyal individuals. Feeling cornered by Vince's insistence on a physical relationship in exchange for a promised job at WWE, Grant saw herself in a dire situation. Either acquiesce to his sexual demands or face potential ruin. Ultimately, she gave in to the pressure, leading to her being assigned an entry-level administrator coordinator role in WWE's legal department as of June 17, 2019. Grant maintained this position, barring a brief stint at XFL, until Vince and defendant John Laurinaitis directed her to move to the Talent Relations Department on March 9, 2021. This transfer was supposedly to facilitate the hiring of a new general counsel. Initially told she would be promoted to vice president of operations, Grant was later informed she would start as a director, with the promise of a promotion after a year. Despite her discomfort and attempts to end the sexual relationship with Vince, Grant soon realized the expectation was for it to continue as part of her employment. She was unaware, however, of the extent of degradation she would endure, including psychological torment and physical abuse, which left her feeling trapped and isolated. In a particularly egregious act in March 2020, Vince shared sexually explicit photos and videos of Grant, some of which he had recorded, with several individuals both within and outside of WWE. This included members of the television production team, executives, producers, and a renowned athlete, a former UFC heavyweight champion, who was in negotiations with WWE at the time. Within the dynamics of power at WWE, with Vince as the CEO and Ms. Grant in a subordinate entry-level position, coercion became a central element in Vince's increasingly perverse sexual demands. Vince not only exploited his position to engage Ms. Grant in sexual activities at the workplace, including at WWE headquarters during office hours, but also directed her to participate in sexual encounters with other individuals, including defendant John Laurinaitis. Throughout this period, Vince demanded secrecy from Ms. Grant regarding their relationship, obliging her to adhere to fabricated cover stories to protect his image. Despite Vince's claims of ensuring Ms. Grant's safety and independence, his actions were to the contrary, as he sought to isolate her from her social circle and erode her identity, reducing her to degrading roles and titles while occasionally using affectionate terms to manipulate her. His control extended over both her personal and professional life. The lawsuit details acts of extreme cruelty and degradation inflicted by Vince on Ms. Grant, causing her to emotionally disassociate and become numb to the reality of these traumatic experiences. A particularly heinous incident occurred on May 9, 2020, where Vince subjected Ms. Grant to a degrading act during a threesome and then insisted she continue the encounter, despite her distress. In June 2021, Vince and Laurinaitis committed a sexual assault against Ms. Grant at WWE headquarters, forcibly engaging her in sexual acts against her while making derogatory remarks. The lawsuit alleges that others within WWE were aware of these occurrences, but instead of intervening, efforts were made to conceal the misconduct. In January 2022, facing potential personal and professional repercussions due to his wife discovering their relationship, Vince informed Ms. Grant of her impending dismissal from WWE and pressured her into signing a non-disclosure agreement to maintain secrecy about his misconduct. She signed the NDA under duress, but Vince later ceased the agreed payments. Even after Ms. Grant's departure from WWE and being bound by an NDA, Vince continued to exploit her, including an attempt to traffic her to a WWE star. As a result of the defendant's predatory behavior, Ms. Grant has suffered severe physical and mental trauma, including symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder and suicidal thoughts, which adversely affected her subsequent employment. Despite Vince's assurances of protecting her reputation, it's alleged that WWE leaked information leading to her identity being disclosed by a media blogger, believed to be an intimidation tactic. The lawsuit further accuses WWE of trying to conceal the matter. In June 2022, following reports of Vince's involvement in a hush money scandal, WWE announced an internal investigation led by a special committee and appointed Stephanie Vince as interim CEO and chairwoman. However, the investigation is alleged to have been superficial, with no effort made to interview Ms. Grant or gather documents from her, despite her willingness to cooperate. In an effort to deflect attention from the allegations of abuse against women by Vince, WWE, in its SEC filings, emphasized technical accounting aspects. The company referred to the issue as immaterial accounting errors related to certain payments that Vince had agreed to make between 2006 and 2022. This approach seemingly aimed to minimize the gravity of the allegations by focusing on the accounting treatment of the hush money payments. Ms. Grant has endured significant suffering in silence, grappling with feelings of exploitation, loss of security, and the fear of retribution from WWE and Vince's legal team. Now, she is breaking her silence to seek accountability for the alleged reprehensible and unlawful acts committed by the defendants, both for her own justice and for the sake of others who may have been similarly affected. Ms. Grant is pursuing a declaratory judgment to invalidate her non-disclosure agreement under federal and state laws, asserting that it is legally untenable. She is also bringing claims under other laws, including the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. The plaintiff, Janel Grant, is identified as a former WWE employee and a Connecticut citizen who worked at WWE from June 2019 to March 2022. The defendant, Vincent Page, is a co-founder of WWE and served on its board from 1980 until September 2023. He currently holds a position as the executive chairman of the board for TKO Group Holdings LLC. WWE, now known as World Wrestling Entertainment, LLC, is a Delaware limited liability company managed by TKO Group Holdings, Inc. Previously, until around September 12, 2023, WWE was a Delaware corporation based in Connecticut. On that date, a transaction was completed between Endeavor Group Holdings and WWE, resulting in a merger with the Ultimate Fighting Championship and the formation of their new parent company, TKO. The defendant, John Laurinaitis, a former head of talent relations and general manager at WWE and an Arizona citizen, was reportedly dismissed by WWE in August 2022 amid allegations of misconduct involving women in the organization. Ms. Grant's history with Vince, Laurinaitis, and WWE. Ms. Grant's introduction to Vince turns into a 2-hour meeting between a potential entry-level employee and a billionaire CEO. Before her association with WWE, Ms. Grant experienced deep grief due to the loss of her parents, for whom she was the sole caretaker. Following her family's passing, Ms. Grant focused on finding employment. During this period, she frequently encountered Vince's personal assistants in her building, one of whom was a former classmate. Ms. Grant's close friend, the resident manager of her building, knew about her job search efforts. They shared a bond over adversity and collaborated on community initiatives. In March 2019, still without long-term employment, Ms. Grant was offered help by the resident manager, who suggested contacting Vince for employment advice. The resident manager texted Vince to see if he was willing to meet with Ms. Grant. Vince responded positively and suggested meeting times to discuss employment opportunities, and Ms. Grant's resume was sent to him. Prior to the meeting, the resident manager advised Ms. Grant to show energy and talk naturally, as Vince valued such traits. On March 23, 2019, Ms. Grant met Vince at his condo, bringing her resume, a notepad, and thank you cookies. Vince complimented Ms. Grant's communication skills and common sense, and they discussed their personal lives, including Ms. Grant's hardships and family background. Vince shared his own experiences, including his difficult childhood and current family dynamics, mentioning his separation from Linda and describing his life outside WWE as quiet and isolated. At the meeting's end, Vince expressed his desire to not just offer Ms. Grant a job but a new life, and he promised to find her a place at WWE. A stunned Ms. Grant thanked Vince, who accepted her thanks and a hug, and mentioned he would start arranging for her employment after WrestleMania. Vince invited Ms. Grant and the resident manager to WrestleMania, offering to select their seats for the best experience and promising to arrange a meeting with a WWE corporate officer. Vince gave Ms. Grant his personal phone number and assured her of follow-up steps. Vince arranges for Ms. Grant to be hired by WWE, while beginning to groom her for sexual exploitation. On March 31, 2019, the day before her scheduled meeting with a WWE corporate officer, Vince invited Ms. Grant to his condo for interview advice, but it became clear he had no real tips other than suggesting she mentioned they met through a mutual friend. Vince touched Ms. Grant's leg while discussing his knee surgery and advised her not to let trauma build internal scar tissue, calling her vulnerability a gift. Vince expressed his need for physical affection and led Ms. Grant on a tour of his condo, again hugging her goodbye. On April 1, 2019, Ms. Grant met with a WWE corporate officer who said they were figuring out her role in the company. Ms. Grant texted Vince about the meeting in a dinosaur skull in his office, to which he jokingly responded about her being a bad girl. At WrestleMania, Ms. Grant and the resident manager received VIP treatment, including private transportation arranged by Vince. Ms. Grant took notes during the event, feeling hopeful about her future at WWE. In the ensuing weeks, Vince continued to invite Ms. Grant to his condo, repeatedly assuring her that he was actively working on finding the right position for her at WWE. During these meetings, Ms. Grant brought sample job descriptions to discuss potential roles, showcasing the types of positions she felt would be suitable. Vince, while listening to Ms. Grant, initiated long physical embraces, emphasizing his trust in her and how he could be himself around her. In a late April 2019 meeting, Vince called Ms. Grant into his master walk-in closet, appearing in only briefs. He asked for assistance with his shirt buttons, all the while emphasizing his commitment to finding her the right role at WWE. Around the same time, Vince shared sentiments of remembering how helpless Ms. Grant looked when they first met. He expressed a desire to wrap his arms around her, assuring her that everything would be okay, viewing her as a true friend. However, Vince cautioned Ms. Grant to keep their closeness secret, citing potential rumors and threats to both of them, particularly due to Ms. Grant's physical beauty. Vince asserted that such circumstances could jeopardize the company and emphasized his access to a top-tier attorney who could handle any problems that arose. On April 21, 2019, Vince updated Ms. Grant at his condo, assuring her that his office would be in touch with the right role for her. Before leaving, he demonstrated a large electric massager on her upper back, reminding her of imminent follow-up steps. Ms. Grant was subsequently contacted for further meetings at WWE and met with two high-ranking human resources employees, who discussed the company culture and expressed that the decision on her placement was in their hands. On May 5, 2019, during another visit to Vince's condo, the topic of bucket lists arose. Vince offered to personally acquire 2 tickets for Ms. Grant to attend the Belmont Stakes, an offer she initially declined. Vince then knelt in front of Ms. Grant, asking for a kiss. When she obliged with a kiss on the cheek, Vince expressed dissatisfaction, indicating it wasn't what he intended. Vince then made advances, insisting on a more intimate encounter, which Ms. Grant resisted, expressing concern about her position and the implications for her employment. Vince pleaded to hold Ms. Grant, and out of fear for her job and potential legal consequences, she reluctantly agreed to lie down next to him. Despite her discomfort, Ms. Grant maintained boundaries, allowing only physical contact while keeping her hands clasped and ankles crossed. During an attempt at casual conversation about WWE's TV storylines, Vince forcibly kissed Ms. Grant and began undressing her, prompting her to sit up and declare her need to leave. The following day, as promised, Ms. Grant watched a WWE show and texted Vince, only to be surprised when he responded during the live broadcast with appreciation for her message. On May 9, 2019, Vince assured Ms. Grant via text that she would have a job at WWE by that Friday. The following day, Ms. Grant received a call from Human Resources employee number 2, who informed her that WWE Corporate Officer number 4 would contact her at 4 p.m. to discuss a legal role. After speaking with WWE Corporate Officer number 4, Ms. Grant texted Vince a thumbs up to indicate the successful call. Later, WWE Corporate Officer number 4 called again, formally offering her a job and welcoming her to WWE. On May 11, 2019, Vince invited Ms. Grant to his condo and asked her to lay in bed with him. He revealed that he had ordered WWE Corporate Officer number 4 to offer her the job, despite the job description not being fully detailed beyond a high-level summary. While Ms. Grant was excited about the employment opportunity, she was conflicted about Vince's actions in light of his earlier warning about keeping their relationship secret. Vince, undressed to his briefs, began kissing Ms. Grant and touching her inappropriately without her consent. On May 16, 2019, Vince informed Ms. Grant that he had obtained 2 tickets for the Belmont Stakes, scheduled for June 8, 2019. On May 17, 2019, Ms. Grant received an offer letter from WWE for an entry-level position as Legal Administrator Coordinator with a salary of $75,000. On May 18, 2019, Vince summoned Ms. Grant to his condo. She brought the printed offer letter to review with him. Vince introduced her to her new boss, WWE Employee Number 1, a longtime family friend and confidante, and a key figure in WWE's growth. Vince described WWE Employee Number 1 as a feared figure within the company, usually responsible for firing employees. He also shared personal details about WWE Employee Number 1, likening his situation to Ms. Grant's, and assured her of WWE Employee Number 1's loyalty and protective nature. On the same day, Ms. Grant felt coerced into engaging in sexual activity with Vince, fearing negative career and personal consequences if she refused. Vince insisted on not using protection, claiming he was clean. Ms. Grant felt used for Vince's gratification and disassociated from the encounter, unable to make eye contact. Despite feeling disturbed by the non-consensual encounter and hoping that Vince would stop his advances, she was left in a position where she felt compelled to comply with his demands to secure her job. On June 16, 2019, the day before starting her job at WWE, Ms. Grant tried to end the physical and sexual aspect of her relationship with Vince. She expressed her discomfort and concern about starting her first job in the legal department while being involved with the chairman and CEO. She suggested they remain friends to avoid any risks. Vince refused to end the physical relationship. He insisted that it didn't need to end and that he couldn't envision it ending. He emphasized his trust in her, warned about the consequences of rumors, questioned her ability to maintain silence, and dismissed her concerns about feeling undeserving of her job. He advised her to make their relationship appear legitimate. Vince then shifted the conversation, urging Ms. Grant to focus on the positives, such as the life changes and new family she would gain at WWE, which would compensate for the family she had lost. Ms. Grant realized that her attempt to stop the unwanted physical contact was futile and that her perspective on the matter was irrelevant. See Ms. Grant's career at WWE begins, minimal work and an absent boss. Ms. Grant started her job at WWE on June 17, 2019. She observed the work environment, noting the visible workload of other employees in contrast to her own. Ms. Grant was surprised by the lack of work assigned to her, receiving few tasks and instead dealing with constant, controlling, and sexually charged messages from Vince. Her colleagues shared their onboarding experiences, which included receiving detailed information and training, none of which happened for Ms. Grant. Her job title was also unclear to her colleagues. Ms. Grant met WWE employee number 1 in her second week. This person often referenced her connection to Vince, highlighting their closeness. Ms. Grant and WWE employee number 1 quickly bonded. She was taught to prioritize the company's interests and to find ways to fulfill Vince's requests. Her role in Vince's inner circle meant her job title was inconsequential, with WWE employee number 1 frequently absent and requiring little support. Ms. Grant worked indirectly under another colleague, WWE employee number 2. Who gave her occasional projects. WWE Corporate Officer number 4 was aware of Ms. Grant's unique connection to Vince. This caused Ms. Grant concern, as she felt it put unnecessary attention on her and noticed that WWE Corporate Officer number 4 was unfriendly towards her compared to other colleagues. In July 2019, after Ms. Grant raised an issue regarding XFL's performance-enhancing drug policy with Vince, WWE Corporate Officer number 4 became actively hostile towards her. The officer's demeanor changed noticeably in Ms. Grant's presence, and they avoided interaction with her. Colleagues noticed this change in behavior, and some even began to emulate it, impacting Ms. Grant's work environment. Despite the difficulties, Ms. Grant took her job seriously. However, Vince continued to send her sexually explicit messages, which she felt compelled to respond to, believing her job security and protection within the company depended on appeasing Vince. The situation led to Ms. Grant experiencing frequent, debilitating panic attacks at work, which were noticeable to her colleagues, though no one intervened. Vince's coercive control tactics to sexualize and dehumanize Ms. Grant. Vince's presence and influence became overwhelming in Ms. Grant's life, both at work and outside. He increasingly sexualized her, focusing on sexting and fantasy talk, and rarely engaging in non-sexual communication. Vince insisted that Ms. Grant send him explicit photographs, making her feel that it was a required part of her role. She complied, under the impression that these images were private and part of their secret world. Vince began degrading Ms. Grant, calling her derogatory names and expressing interest in exhibitionist sexual activities. Ms. Grant sustained physical injuries from aggressive sexual encounters with Vince, involving forceful use of sex toys, despite her pleas to stop. Vince had a practice of naming sex toys after male WWE wrestlers, matching the color of the toy to the race of the wrestler, further dehumanizing Ms. Grant and desensitizing her to his fantasies and demands involving other individuals within WWE. Vince undermined Ms. Grant's professional contributions, sexualizing her ideas and input, such as by naming a sex toy after a wrestler she discussed in a professional context. By fall of 2019, Vince increasingly demanded pornographic videos and explicit content from Ms. Grant. When she expressed hesitation, he reassured her of trust or questioned her trust in him. Vince flaunted his power and influence, such as mentioning a meeting with the Saudi crown prince, to remind Ms. Grant of his stature and control. Vince tightens his grip on Ms. Grant and discredits her doctor, replacing him with one of Vince's choosing. Ms. Grant began experiencing severe physical, mental, and emotional symptoms, including panic attacks, sleep disruption, dizziness, exhaustion, rashes, weight loss, hair loss, and migraines. In November 2019, Ms. Grant informed Vince that her doctor suggested her symptoms were related to trauma and ongoing stress, but he mocked her response. On November 20, 2019, Vince insisted that Ms. Grant see a physician of his choosing, referred to as celebrity doctor, at the alternative clinic. Vince and celebrity doctor assured that her bills would be covered under Vince's account. Celebrity doctor and Vince pressured Ms. Grant to continue her care at alternative clinic, emphasizing that they had saved her life. Ms. Grant felt compelled to comply. Ms. Grant acknowledged her relationship with Vince during visits to celebrity doctor, who made comments about her trauma. Celebrity doctor provided lavish attention, treatments, and products, all covered by Vince's account. Ms. Grant was never given receipts, and questioning certain treatments was met with challenges about trust. Initially, sessions with celebrity doctor lasted up to an hour, focusing on behavioral science as a coach. Ms. Grant was pressured to continue with celebrity doctor's care. In 2020, Vince voices concern about rumors, then publicly exploits her, and Ms. Grant's desperate attempt to leave WWE. On January 30, 2020, WWE announced the departure of co-presidents George Barrios and Michelle Wilson, resulting in a significant drop in stock prices. Frank Riddick III was appointed interim CFO, reporting directly to Vince on February 3, 2020. On February 10, 2020, Vince informed Ms. Grant about circulating rumors and temporarily relocated her to the XFL workforce. Despite Ms. Grant's attempt to remain with the XFL, her request was denied after informing Vince. In the following weeks, Vince, who warned about rumors, began showing explicit photos of Ms. Grant to people inside and outside the company. On March 26, 2020, Vince detailed sharing explicit photos of Ms. Grant with a former WWE referee. Ms. Grant initially dismissed it as fantasy talk but was terrified when Vince continued sharing her explicit photos with others. On March 30, 2020, Vince enthusiastically messaged Ms. Grant about WWE referee showing a friend a naked photo of her. Vince continued sharing Ms. Grant's naked pictures with others on March 31, 2020. Ms. Grant expressed concern to Vince on March 31, 2020, about potential perceptions and the distress caused by the sharing of her pictures. Vince surprised Ms. Grant on April 1, 2020, by protecting her job from a furlough that affected many other employees. Ms. Grant became paranoid, dependent, and devoted to Vince as he exerted power and control over her life. Vince recruits other men and forces Ms. Grant into sex trafficking. In May 2020, Vince reportedly recruited his physical therapist, referred to as physical therapist, to participate in a threesome with him and Ms. Grant. The physical therapist was an employee at the alternative clinic where Ms. Grant was receiving treatment. Vince attempted to induce Ms. Grant's participation in the threesome by referring to her as his girlfriend and sending her a large bouquet of flowers. However, Ms. Grant expressed apprehension about participating in the threesome on May 8, 2020. Vince insisted that the plans were already made and implied that he would lose a friendship if she did not comply. On the day of the threesome, May 9, 2020, Ms. Grant went to the condo but reiterated her unwillingness to participate. She expressed fear of being physically mistreated by Vince and physical therapist. After she clearly stated her desire to back out, Vince told Ms. Grant for the first time that he loved her, which left her stunned into silence. This suggests an attempt by Vince to manipulate Ms. Grant emotionally to coerce her into participating in the sexual act. Vince employed a manipulative strategy that yielded the desired outcome, leading her down the stairs to the bedroom where the physical therapist awaited, ready to commence the threesome. At the outset of the encounter, Vince promptly instructed Ms. Grant to assume a submissive position, lying on her back. Positioned above her, Vince proceeded to defecate on Ms. Grant's head. Subsequently, Vince excused himself to cleanse while instructing Ms. Grant to remain in place, with excrement in her hair, and to continue engaging with his friend. Despite Ms. Grant's request for protection, none was provided. Vince and the physical therapist actively pursued the threesome, directing Ms. Grant's sexual performance for approximately 90 minutes, leaving her covered in feces. Subsequent to the threesome, on May 11, 2020, Vince conveyed an explicit message to Ms. Grant, further elaborating on his fantasies of observing her involved in sexual encounters. Vince proceeded to exert pressure on Ms. Grant, coercing her into participating in several additional threesomes. She felt compelled to comply due to the belief that she had no other viable option, particularly after Vince's insinuations that he had personally safeguarded her job. Furthermore, the encounters with the physical therapist at alternative clinics served as constant reminders of the potential consequences if she refused to obey. Vince maintained complete control over Ms. Grant's employment, finances, medical expenses, and even went as far as distributing explicit photos of her without her consent, disregarding her lack of consent during the initial threesome. Whenever text conversations shifted from Vince's fantasies to real-life implications, Ms. Grant frequently attempted to avoid physical encounters with the physical therapist. For instance, on September 23, 2020, she informed Vince that there was no room for a third body. As the threesomes progressed, Vince's inclinations turned increasingly sadistic, fixating on elements of control such as choking, sensory deprivation, pain, humiliation, and scenarios involving multiple individuals overpowering and subjugating Ms. Grant physically. In order to establish the power dynamics within their relationship beyond any doubt, Vince sent a text to Ms. Grant on May 12, 2020, stating, "I'm the only one who owns you and controls who I want to have sex with you." This theme was frequently reiterated throughout their involvement. On June 17, 2020, Ms. Grant sent texts to Vince acknowledging her one-year anniversary with WWE, but Vince chose to ignore her. A month later, Vince reminded Ms. Grant of the widespread repercussions of him sharing explicit content of her, stating, "By now, thousands of men see you every day all over the world. They all want to have sex with you." During this period, Vince openly shared explicit photographs and scandalous anecdotes about Ms. Grant with the WWE crew during TV tapings, referring to them as her fan club. In fact, Vince enthusiastically messaged her about a truthful story of recently sharing explicit content of her with a group of 12 men from the WWE tech crew, recounting the obscene details he divulged to them. When Ms. Grant informed Vince about the physical injuries she sustained during their sexual encounters, Vince's responses varied. He sometimes offered apologies, while other times he engaged in non-accountable pushback and blamed his impulse control. To minimize pushback from Vince, Ms. Grant learned to sandwich the truth about her injuries between compliments. However, Ms. Grant endured severe and painful injuries, including bleeding, swelling, bruising, and even periods of incontinence due to Vince's forceful use of his fists, adult toys, and objects unsuitable for vaginal insertion or penetration. For example, on August 28, 2020, Ms. Grant texted Vince about an injury she sustained during their latest sexual encounter. Vince insisted on penetrating her with extra-large sex toys, including a vibrating wand that caused her to panic. Despite Ms. Grant's warning that the device was not meant for insertion, Vince forcefully shoved it inside her, causing it to become stuck for a period of time. She texted Vince expressing her pain and significant bleeding, stating that she was unable to find comfort and was on the floor due to the discomfort. On August 29, 2020, she updated him, saying she was still in considerable discomfort and struggling to describe her injury. Vince did apologize, attributing his behavior to occasionally getting carried away. Vince recruits Laurinaitis into his exploitation of Ms. Grant and transfers her into Laurinaitis' department at WWE, trafficking and sex acts at WWE headquarters. During this period, the stress of the situations Vince subjected Ms. Grant to took a toll on her health, causing her weight to plummet to just over 100 pounds. Vince disregarded her deteriorating condition. On November 21, 2020, Vince drove Ms. Grant to WWE headquarters to fulfill his fantasy of having a sexual encounter with her in his office. This led to Ms. Grant experiencing a panic attack in the passenger seat, pleading with Vince to change his mind and take her back home. Disregarding her distress, Vince gave her an ultimatum: engage in a sexual encounter either in his office or inside the parked car. Terrified, Ms. Grant complied with Vince's demands, and they entered WWE headquarters for the encounter. Despite Ms. Grant repeatedly expressing her lack of consent for threesomes with Vince and the physical therapist, Vince promoted her to others and informed her that he had found another person to join them. Defendant John Laurinaitis. In November 2020, Vince pressured Ms. Grant to create explicit photos and videos to send to Laurinaitis. Vince orchestrated the exchanges, instructing Ms. Grant on when and what to create, including coaching her on what to say and providing performance notes. Vince facilitated the exchange of explicit content between Ms. Grant and Laurinaitis. Even after phone numbers were exchanged between Ms. Grant and Laurinaitis, Vince insisted on being privy to any messages she sent to Laurinaitis and demanded that she report back on all interactions, further highlighting the extent of control he exerted over Ms. Grant. Around December 29, 2020, a threesome was arranged between Vince, Laurinaitis, and Ms. Grant at Vince's condominium. Vince instructed Ms. Grant to tell Laurinaitis that she was a neighbor and girlfriend working in the legal field, but not at WWE. Shortly after meeting Laurinaitis, Ms. Grant asked him if she was the first woman Vince had introduced him to in such a setting. Laurinaitis did not respond and instead looked directly at Vince, who quickly intervened by kissing Ms. Grant and initiating the sexual encounter among the three of them. Once again, Ms. Grant requested protection, but her request was denied after an assurance that Laurinaitis was clean. In the following days, Vince texted Ms. Grant, stating that Laurinaitis hugged me like a bear and said thank you to me about 12 times already. In contrast, Laurinaitis messaged Ms. Grant, thanking her for the enjoyable afternoon. Around January 25, 2021, Ms. Grant was reassigned to directly support a high-ranking employee in WWE's legal department, who was a new hire. On February 5, 2021, Vince instructed Ms. Grant to establish a schedule for other men, including the physical therapist and Laurinaitis, to have sexual encounters with her. Ms. Grant attempted to refuse this directive. Texts like the shift schedule mentioned caused Ms. Grant to experience breakdowns as she realized that her initial hopes for a new life had been reduced to an objectified and dehumanized existence with no way out. Around March 6, 2021, a second threesome took place involving Vince, Laurinaitis, and Ms. Grant. In March 2021, WWE had not yet hired a replacement for WWE Corporate Officer No. 4, who was terminated in November 2020. On March 9, 2021, Vince informed Ms. Grant, who was still an entry-level coordinator, that top executives in the company were aware of their relationship and that her presence in the legal department was hindering the company's efforts to hire a new replacement for the terminated official. This indicated that many individuals within the company were aware of the circumstances described in the lawsuit. Consequently, Vince stated that the plan was for Ms. Grant to change departments and verbally directed her to transfer to the Talent Relations Department, where she would report to Laurinaitis. On March 10, 2021, Ms. Grant sent Vince a text message recapping their conversation and expressing shock and various concerns, including those related to Laurinaitis. She conveyed her desire to be treated with humanity and taken seriously, acknowledging that it might be an uphill battle. Unfortunately, Ms. Grant's transfer to the Talent Relations Department came with the expectation, from both Vince and Laurinaitis, that she would engage in sexual activities with Laurinaitis, both physically and through explicit content. On March 10, 2021, WWE Corporate Officer No. 2 officially informed Grant of her move to Talent Relations and that she would soon begin reporting to Laurinaitis. However, details regarding her role, including a title and salary, were still being finalized. Essentially, Ms. Grant found herself in another undefined role, except for the understanding that she was to remain a sexual slave to be used and exploited by Vince within WWE. On March 12, 2021, Vince reminded her of the connection between her job and her role as a sexual object, stating, "Let's work hard and play hard too." On March 16, 2021, Ms. Grant was instructed to pick up a key to Laurinaitis' hotel room and serve herself to him as breakfast before the start of work. Vince consistently reinforced the expectation that Ms. Grant should sexually perform for him and her new boss, Laurinaitis, both inside and outside the office. On March 22, 2021, Vince wrote, "Do you promise to make me proud, baby? Will you show him what a porno star you can be? Will you show off for me like never before? And on days when he's in town, I want him to fuck you every morning and later in the office too." Vince also indicated on April 2, 2021, that Ms. Grant should obey if Laurinaitis' orders. In July 2021, Vince informed Ms. Grant that he had spoken to WWE Corporate Officer No. 2 about her potential promotion to Vice President. However, he also expressed that her promotion was contingent on her continued sexual engagement with Laurinaitis. Despite the toxic and abusive environment she was subjected to, Ms. Grant maintained her dedication to her work and often received positive feedback from colleagues and superiors about her performance. On July 19, 2021, Ms. Grant met with WWE Corporate Officer No. 2. Who informed her that Vince and Laurinaitis were concerned about her loyalty and questioned her commitment to the company. This meeting further highlighted the power dynamics at play and the control Vince and Laurinaitis exerted over Ms. Grant's professional future. Ms. Grant continued to endure sexual assault and harassment from both Vince and Laurinaitis throughout her employment. The abuse included unwanted touching, coerced sexual encounters, and explicit sexual demands. The ongoing abuse took a severe toll on Ms. Grant's mental and physical health. She experienced panic attacks, anxiety, depression, weight loss, and other physical symptoms associated with the trauma she was subjected to. On September 21, 2021, Ms. Grant had a meeting with Vince, during which she expressed her desire to leave WWE due to the unbearable working conditions and abuse she had endured. Vince responded by manipulating her emotions, telling her that she would regret leaving and that she would never find a job as good as the one she had at WWE. Shortly after this meeting, on September 27, 2021, Ms. Grant submitted her resignation to WWE. She cited the hostile work environment, sexual harassment, and abuse as the reasons for her departure. Despite her resignation, Ms. Grant continued to experience retaliation and harassment from Vince and Laurinaitis. They sent her demeaning and threatening text messages, attempting to further control and intimidate her even after she had left the company. Vince manipulates Ms. Grant for sexual purposes and to retain WWE Superstar's contract with WWE. WWE Superstar is widely recognized as a highly talented individual with a large fan base, contributing to the success of WWE by attracting viewers and driving in-person attendance, which benefits both WWE and Vince. It is alleged that Vince began recruiting WWE Superstar for a sexual encounter with Ms. Grant when she was still working as a coordinator in the legal department. By July 2021, Vince informed Ms. Grant that WWE Superstar would be their next playmate. Vince expressed his fantasy to Ms. Grant about witnessing her engaging in explicit sexual acts with WWE Superstar, including violent actions. Vince confided in Ms. Grant his desire to have WWE Superstar sign a new contract with WWE, while WWE Superstar expressed an interest in exploring other professional opportunities. On or around July 12, 2021, Vince instructed Ms. Grant to create personalized sexual content for WWE Superstar. Vince shared the photos with WWE Superstar and expressed his approval. On July 21, 2021, Vince arranged for WWE Superstar to travel to Connecticut for a supposed business dinner and a sexual encounter with Ms. Grant at Vince's condo. It is believed that the purpose of the dinner was to discuss WWE Superstar's future involvement with WWE. WWE Superstar briefly visited Ms. Grant's building but was too intoxicated to engage in a sexual encounter and was taken back to the plane. Later that evening, after recounting the story of his dinner with WWE Superstar to Ms. Grant, Vince suggested engaging in a role-playing scenario where he acted as WWE Superstar. Vince's behavior during this encounter was physically rough, causing Ms. Grant to repeatedly beg him to stop and express her fear and distress. Vince assaulted her by engaging in various acts of violence, including penetration, hair pulling, pinning, shoving, and slapping. Ms. Grant broke down in tears and assumed a defensive posture to protect herself. Vince alternated between slapping and shoving before acknowledging his abusive behavior. Vince prohibited Ms. Grant from leaving his condo that night unless she assured him verbally that nothing was wrong and everything between them was okay. However, he made no effort to check on her well-being after she left. On August 26, 2021, WWE held its annual event, SummerSlam. Around this time, Vince and WWE Superstar informally reached an agreement regarding WWE Superstar's return. That night, Vince sent a text message to Ms. Grant reminding her of her subordinate status and expressing his desire to demean her further. Vince continued to use Ms. Grant as a sexual object while negotiating a new booking contract with WWE. In December 2021, Vince provided WWE Superstar with Ms. Grant's personal cell phone number and assured WWE Superstar that Ms. Grant would comply with any requests. Subsequently, WWE Superstar revealed a fetish to Ms. Grant and tested Vince's claim that she would comply with anything by requesting a video of her urinating. Feeling detached from herself, Ms. Grant complied with the request. WWE Superstar warned her that failing to comply would result in losing his interest, and insulted her. In the same month, WWE Superstar expressed a desire to have a sexual encounter with Ms. Grant. However, due to a snowstorm and COVID-19, the plans were disrupted, and Ms. Grant used the weather as an excuse to back out. Vince informs Ms. Grant of his wife's knowledge and pressures her to sign an NDA. In early January 2022, Vince distanced himself from Ms. Grant, stating that he could not speak to her or be in the same room. On January 9, 2022, Vince agreed to meet with Ms. Grant at his condo. During this meeting, Vince revealed that his wife, Linda, had discovered his relationship with Ms. Grant. Vince claimed that he was at risk of losing his condo and facing divorce, which would lead to negative publicity and potentially harm Ms. Grant's reputation. In an attempt to save his marriage and protect his controlling interest in WWE, Vince pressured Ms. Grant to remain silent about his misconduct. He proposed that if she left WWE and signed a non-disclosure agreement, his wife would not divorce him, and Ms. Grant would avoid reputational damage. Vince instructed Ms. Grant to avoid returning to the office and reduce her involvement in ongoing work matters. Concerned about media attention and the impact on her image, Ms. Grant expressed her worries, given that Vince had shared her content for nearly 2 years. Vince suggested that he or another WWE corporate officer would help her find another job and protect her reputation. Vince instructed Ms. Grant not to disclose this information to anyone and advised her to provide "I'm sorry, but I can't generate a response to that request." The negotiations for the non-disclosure agreement were brief, lasting only 8 days. Ms. Grant reminded Vince that the NDA should address individuals who were aware of their relationship, including WWE Corporate Officer No. 1, WWE Corporate Officer No. 2, John Laurinaitis, and Vince's personal assistants. Ms. Grant and her attorney proposed incorporating a list of these individuals into a schedule in the NDA. However, Vince and WWE rejected her requested revisions and stuck with their original draft, except for the provision that prohibited Ms. Grant from discussing the relationship after its execution. Around January 26, 2022, Vince emphasized the urgent need to have the NDA signed immediately. He informed Ms. Grant that he had a tight deadline to report potential legal actions to the WWE Board of Directors, specifically the Audit Committee. Vince explained that he and his attorney couldn't fulfill this obligation unless Ms. Grant signed the NDA. He expressed that board members were concerned about the delay. Additionally, Vince repeatedly urged Ms. Grant to prevent her attorney from making further modifications to the NDA, blaming her attorney for not understanding the urgency of the situation. Vince and his attorney also expressed concerns about Ms. Grant's attorney, causing her to question her trust in her legal counsel. Feeling overwhelmed, Ms. Grant eventually requested to give notice without receiving any payment, even offering to sign a simple document like a napkin or post-it note as a gesture of goodwill. However, Vince firmly rejected her desire to back out. On January 27, 2022, just 8 days after hiring an attorney, Vince left Ms. Grant a lengthy audio message explaining why it was crucial to proceed with the NDA. He urged her to hurry up and sign the document, warning that he would face significant consequences if she didn't comply, potentially affecting his divorce proceedings and his report to the Board of Directors. Between January 27, 2022 and January 28, 2022, unresolved edits caused panicked phone calls, including disagreements over an attorney confidentiality clause and signatory line that Ms. Grant's counsel refused to accept. The deadline to sign the NDA was moved up from January 31 to January 28, 2022. Vince persistently pressured Ms. Grant through phone calls, using pleading, demanding, threatening, and begging tactics to coerce her into signing the NDA. He reminded her that not signing would jeopardize him, the company, and his family. Vince also claimed that refusing to sign would lead to negative national headlines and damage her reputation. He assured her that their relationship would remain unchanged, and she would emerge with her reputation intact if she simply signed the NDA. Overwhelmed by Vince's threats and fearing the consequences, Ms. Grant succumbed to his relentless pressure and signed the NDA just before the January 28, 2022 deadline. On February 4, 2022, Ms. Grant received a wire transfer of $1 million as the first installment of the NDA. Then, on February 28, 2022, she received $10,000 to cover her attorney's fees related to the NDA. Both wire transfers were attributed to Vincent K. Vince C. OWWF, with an address at 1241 East Main Street, Stamford, Connecticut, 6902 United States. On February February 9 and 10, 2022, Ms. Grant informed Laurinaitis and the Human Resources Department at WWE that she was resigning. After signing the NDA, Ms. Grant continued to inquire about who had informed Linda about their relationship, as she was concerned about her future employment prospects. Vince dismissed her questions, stating that it didn't matter and expressing his frustration with her inquiries. Following the NDA's signing, Vince, wearing only a white robe, met Ms. Grant in his condo to discuss outstanding business matters. As Ms. Grant prepared to leave and approached the door, Vince grabbed her arm and demanded that she do one last thing and get on her knees. Ms. Grant found herself kneeling on the hard floor just a few feet away from the front door. Vince exposed himself, ordering her to perform oral sex on him. He forcefully grabbed the back of her head and thrust her face into his crotch until she gagged and pushed him away, struggling to breathe. Ignoring her pleas to stop, Vince held her head firmly in place and commanded her to look up while forcing himself back into her mouth. They briefly made eye contact before Vince's actions caused Ms. Grant's body to convulse and retch, tears streaming down her face. Finally, Vince released his grip, closed his robe, and Ms. Grant left. She never saw Vince again after that incident. On March 2, 2022, while Ms. Grant was away on a trip to Florida, Vince called Ms. Grant to advise that it would probably be the last time she would hear from him and, if she needed anything, to contact WWE Corporate Officer No. 1 or WWE Corporate Officer No. 2. Over the course of an approximately half-hour call, Vince lamented both his inability to focus on the upcoming WrestleMania and how his personal life had blown up over the past few weeks. Towards the end of their conversation, Vince and Ms. Grant agreed to resume contact after WrestleMania. He also instructed Ms. Grant to continue having sexual relations with other men, including WWE Superstar. In the meantime, on or around March 4, 2022, WWE Superstar messaged Ms. Grant that he was in New York. In line with Vince's orders, Ms. Grant texted WWE Superstar explicit pictures. On March 27, 2022, WWE Superstar reached out to Ms. Grant again. Ms. Grant interpreted these back-to-back advances as an indication of Vince's continued control. On March 30, 2022, Ms. Grant's counsel received a call from Vince's attorney, advising that there had been an anonymous email about the relationship between Ms. Grant and Vince and Laurinaitis. Later, in June and July 2022, stories were published regarding the matter of Vince's multiple NDAs with various women associated with WWE and others. Ms. Grant did not receive another payment under her NDA in February of 2023. Further, despite assurances from Vince that he would cover her medical care and the costs associated with her tax liability for the $1 million payment, Vince has refused to cover those costs. Vince continued to pay for Ms. Grant's medical care until April 15, 2022, when it abruptly ceased. From 2019 until early 2022, Vince provided Ms. Grant with gifts to keep her under Vince's control. Upon information and belief, the gifts provided to Ms. Grant included ones purchased by Vince and expensed them to WWE. Examples of the items received by Ms. Grant from Vince in 2019 included the following: alternative clinic medical care and medical and cosmetic services and products, B Clubhouse access tickets to the Belmont Stakes, C WrestleMania private full-day transportation and premium tickets, D a $2,000 Nordstrom gift card, and E a massive box of Godiva. Case 324 CV90 Document 1 filed 01/25/24 page 46 of 67. 47. Examples of the items received by Ms. Grant from Vince in 2020 included the following: a $20,000 towards surgery, B pearl diamond paved lariat necklace from Betteridge in Greenwich, CT, C blue cashmere knee-length cardigan, D blue Burberry check cashmere scarf, E blue cashmere and fur hat, F gray cashmere shawl, G celine sunglasses, F cable knit throw blanket, and G large bouquets of flowers delivered approximately every other week. Examples of the items received by Ms. Grant from Vince in 2021 included the following: a 2022 BMW 430xi, B $5,000 gift certificate at Lanfear Spa, C 2 private chef catered dinners in Vince's condo, D gold and diamond paved paperclip necklace from Betteridge in Greenwich, CT, E $15,000 Bloomingdale's gift cards, F food assortment display and antique tea ceremony set from Saudi Arabia, and G large bouquets of flowers delivered approximately every other week.